Well, I'm supposed to be talking to you about stratigraphy, but I need to clean off my desk before I can do that. And then I started thinking I can probably do those two things at the same time, because my desk has sort of a stratigraphic record of things that I've been doing over the last couple months since the last time I cleaned it up. In stratigraphy, we talked a little bit about something called the law of superposition, which means that the stuff that's on top of a pile, whether it's on a desk or in layers of sediment in an archaeological site, is the stuff that was put there most recently. So earlier this morning, on this pile of material, I was stapling together some papers. So this is at the top of the pile. This represents the most recent activity that's gone on this part of my desk. Now, if this were an archaeological site, rather than just picking this up and talking about it, every piece of material I'd be removing on cleaning this desk surface would be mapped, recorded, numbered, bagged, tagged, kept separately. Each one would be dealt with as a piece of information. But now I'm just going to take the ones that I'm going to move over to where they belong and set them aside and go on along with the desk cleaning. So that was the first thing. That's the most recent thing that happened. Underneath that, there's a piece of paper here on making split twig figurines. And that's one of the lessons we've done on this Zoom class, is thinking about perishable materials, thinking about making old materials, and this was one of the parts of that lesson. I don't need this anymore. This, again, unlike an archaeological material, can go right into the garbage. Down beneath that, something I'd done yesterday, my UAS certificate of registration for my drone flying. That'll get filed away here. Okay, underneath that was laying up here about like this. Underneath that is a book I was reading a couple days ago. Got set off to the side. Pencil in it, mark my place, just like the stratigraphic layers mark their place and time. That's where I quit reading. Need to get back to that. Mouse pad, I don't know how that ended up here. It doesn't belong here. Now things are getting a little complex. We've got a couple things here that are going together. There's one of my GPS receivers that I've been out recording some things the other day, brought this back, downloaded it, and just set it on the desk. So that happened next. Okay, here we get, in terms of the stratigraphy, a really useful bit of information, a really useful thing in the layer. This is a science magazine, and Science publishes this once a week. So this has a date on it. This is what we call an index marker or a dated layer in this stratigraphy here. This journal was published on June 5th. So knowing that this was here sometime after June 5th gives us sort of a minimal age for what's going on with there. So this is an important one. This is a marker layer. Underneath this Science magazine that was put there sometime after June 5th, there's a stone flake. And those of you who are in this Zoom class or in this series of Zoom classes maybe recognize this one. This is one I knocked off a core a couple weeks ago, did some videos on, labeled bits and pieces of it, and I've been looking for this because I want to do some more with it in terms of the stone tool working. So this will go in my back pocket and I'll work on it later. Some more paperwork, another GPS I'd ordered in late May 27th. So that works with the relative dating of the stratigraphy here. This Science magazine was June 5th. Here underneath it is something from May 27th. Okay, and I'll put that back over there to file later. Ooh, underneath that May 27th, 2020 is sort of a problematic bit of stratigraphic information. This is a book that was published in 1969, and if we were to just go by the date of publication, we would say we'd all of a sudden jumped from a layer that was May 2020 back almost 50 years to 1969. And that's important to think about in terms of what I mentioned earlier about that Science magazine. The date on the magazine tells you that the stuff that built up adjacent to it or above it happened sometime after that. So finding this book in this layer on my desk doesn't mean that I started putting stuff here in 1969. It means that I started putting stuff here sometime after 1969. And in fact, it was just a week or so ago when I wanted to look into this for some sort of obscure quote. So that's an important lesson to think about stratigraphy. Sometimes you may find things that give you a hint at the age and maybe take you down a path where you think the age is, but it may not be the age that it was really laid down. The ages on objects, the ages on things that are dated in sites, are the ages when they were made, or in radiocarbon dating, when they died. They're not necessarily when they were introduced into the site. So I'll put this back in the bookshelf where it belongs. Underneath that, another Science magazine, another marker layer. This is the 29th of May. So that puts us back into the sequence of events that make sense in terms of the timing of what's really been going on there. Above it had been that paper from the 27th of May when I'd ordered some stuff online. Then above that was the Science magazine from the 5th of June. So we're getting layers that are consistent with time as we go deeper. Next we find a light for one of my microscopes, because for a while there I was getting real excited this spring. This is May 4th, about collecting ticks out and about, just because I was interested in tick ecology. So here's lots of bags of Rocky Mountain ticks labeled by the time and date and place they came from, the temperature that they were collected at, the relative humidity, a big bag of ticks. Again, I've been wondering where these ticks went to. Going down in our stratigraphic record, bank statement of an account of mine for research funds that doesn't have any money in it, so it got left there. More magazines, more magazines. Another great Science magazine, another marker layer, March 27th. So there we've got another dated after this event, March 27th. These things may have occurred. Then, getting near the bottom of this pile, we've got a boarding pass for a flight on March 14th from Denver to Baltimore. And that's been a while ago, but it's in the proper stratigraphic sequence. Below that, more magazines, stuff that's been there forever, and I'll go ahead and clean up my desk further after this. But I think that this gives you some ideas about how stratigraphic sequences work, regardless of whether they're on a messy desk like this or in an archaeological site where sediments are building up through time. The idea being that the stuff that's down lower in the pile is the stuff that was deposited first. As things build up, the materials get more recent and more recent and more recent until there's the stuff that was dropped today or 100 years ago, or however it works in terms of the time scale you're dealing with. The other thing that I think was useful in going through this pile on my desk was the idea that just because you find something that you can assign a date to in a stratigraphic level or in sequence doesn't necessarily mean that that's when it was deposited there. You have to take the context of the objects, the association with them, how they fit into the stratigraphic layering above and below, to really try and figure out that this book wasn't put in this pile in 1969, in part because this house wasn't built in 1969, but also because there's other things going on in terms of the activities that have taken place here. So that's it for desktop stratigraphy, and I'm going to go ahead and, as I said, clean it up, and you can go ahead and start thinking about how stratigraphy and layering and the buildup of materials on landscapes and in sites can relate to time.